Welcome to BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. Today we're looking at the issues of skills for the green economy. We're doing this to follow up the recent release of the Skills for the Green Economy report from UK Government, in which they say this, that researchers identified that some £22 billion a year of potential savings to UK businesses could be achieved by using raw materials, energy and water more efficiently. So to discuss those issues today, we have around the table with us John Booth. We have Colin Pattinson, Kate Craig-Wood, Bob Crooks and Peter Hopton. So welcome everybody. Just like to kick this off with a very straightforward questions. Do companies know what they're asking for when they say they want to go green? So if the board are asked to go green, do they know what's being requested really?
I think it's probably different in each case. I think it's there will be some balance of driver, some reason for doing that, but I suspect if you asked Board A versus Board B, you would get slightly different responses. One thing I would hope that is changing a little bit is that they're doing it for what you might call genuine reasons rather than simply the box ticking, checking mentality that perhaps has prevailed a little bit in the past.
Right.
I'd say it's, yeah, it does vary depending on the organisation. I think a lot of companies, because they don't necessarily have people within the organisation that can do the quantitative analysis, they end up getting something like ISO 14001, and they do genuinely are trying to do good, but actually it's more about recycling your waste paper. And actually the huge impact often is things like people driving to work, and by making small changes in behaviours that are sometimes slightly external to the organisation, or just you know, doing ISO 14001, you can actually completely miss out almost the power bit, which obviously in IT is a big factor. So yeah, I think often people don't know quite what they really are asking for, and then often get missold things as well, unfortunately.
Mm. I think one of the key things we found is that it's very important to understand the whole scope of your energy take in, your emissions, and in order to find out where your hotspots are. And I think that gives some priority to understanding your actual activities from end to end, from commuting through to production, development of services, maintaining them, operating them, and final decommissioning or disposal of those, and the whole processes around that. So I think it's quite a call there to give something to small businesses and businesses in the wider sector to address and understand where they are before they can decide where they want to go on the green
I think
agenda.
one of the biggest problems is actually that IT is outside of that remit. A lot of even the holding organisations like the government, you go to one of the energy saving trusts and ask to speak to a consultant, and he'll come in and he'll show you where you can improve waste, improve your energy consumption within the building itself. But it's very rare for them to talk about IT. It's like IT is tucked away in this little box, and nobody wants to open the box because it is so complicated.
Right.
That's
very much agree with that point from John, and it's actually extremely important that when people look at going green or trying to, well, there's two types of going green obviously. There's one which is a marketing spin, going green, and there's the other which is trying to save resource, reduce costs. And if you look at the save resource, reduce costs aspect of going green, I mean, there's been various studies at different organisations, but if you look, you know, your typical commercial organisation or educational organisation like universities find about 30 to 50% of their electricity bill is as a result of IT equipment. That's a massive proportion, and yet it's kind of excluded from energy efficiency measures. And by the time they finish the energy efficiency measures, that 30 to 50% is now 40 to 70%, you know, at least towards the upper end of the boundary, because they really ignored the IT. And you go to the IT guys and they're doing certain things, but as John points out, really it's been something that's kind of been ignored. Carbon Trust, of course, did their energy efficiency scheme, which now has kind of ended in one guise and continued on as an interest-bearing commercial loan with the Carbon Trust brand on it. And when they did that, they pretty much ignored IT. You couldn't get anything for virtualization, you couldn't get anything for software-related carbon reductions, and it was only in the very last year that you could actually look at a hardware replacement plan A for B that would reduce energy consumption from IT. And really, you know, we've got a market in the UK for green IT, unlike any other country in the world, because other countries have incentives that help drive that green IT market, whereas here in the UK, it is so detached from the green agenda.
And I think Pete's point's really pertinent when, with things like servers. I've done the calculation several times, and it's worth replacing them on about a 3 to 4 year time frame, even when you account for the embedded energy, because so much of their energy and their carbon footprint is in the use phase. And Moore's law has just been squeezing down the amount of power they use while increasing the amount of work they can do. But because that sort of thing has fallen outside the remit, often there's great scope for making some really good both cost and carbon savings that get ignored, which is really frustrating, actually.
And one thing that's very important is that if you look at the Carbon Trust, what you can buy under the scheme with the accelerated capital allowances now, it doesn't talk about energy monitoring. So you can't get assistance to actually begin your road down the green IT because there isn't any assistance for you. Okay. So you can't buy energy monitoring systems, you can't buy PC power management systems, you can't buy data centre infrastructure management systems with incentives from the government.
You see people turn up at green IT conferences saying, oh, we've got enhanced capital allowances and we've got this and that. You actually look at enhanced capital allowances, there's nothing on there for green IT at all, maybe with the exception of flywheel UPS systems. And that's it.
It's very interesting. Last week I was talking to one of the big electrical companies, and they were actually saying that they wanted to start up a data centre energy efficiency forum and look to pay for some energy efficiency measures to be taken on behalf of their customers, which I think is possibly got a lot of room to move there. That sounds quite interesting.
Okay. Well, I think that's set up some of the issues quite nicely for us. In terms of IT, what is the green economy all about? How can we define the green economy in IT terms? There is a definition in the report, actually, but I'd just be interested to hear your views on that.
I think it's about looking at the role IT can play in helping the development, the production and the use of services, by recognising that IT itself is a player in those stages of economic activity, so that you're looking at IT as a sink for energy and a generator of emissions, as Peter said earlier, but you're also looking at IT as an enabler, as providing an opportunity to improve and tackle what I suppose normally have always been called the other 98%, whereas IT has been seen as 2% related to the air traffic footprint globally. There's the other 98% we have to tackle. And IT is there, it's a valuable commodity, accepted, it takes power itself, it takes resources, therefore we ought to value it and use it more effectively once we have it.
I think it's exactly that. The Global E-Sustainability Smart 2020 report identified a number of ways that ICT could be used to save something like 15% of Europe's carbon emissions over the next sort of 10 years. The Wildlife Fund, it's there, saving the first 1 billion tonnes with ICT. So on the one hand, there's many ways that ICT can be used to address that 98% that isn't our responsibility. I think the challenge for us as an industry is to demonstrate that we can do that we can kind of be the white knight with things like smart grid, smart buildings, improved logistics, teleworking and that sort of thing, that we can do that without becoming the new carbon generator. And I think that's possible. The difficulty with what we're seeing with government is that there's a real danger of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And actually, as an industry, our energy footprint might increase from, at the moment we do 2% of carbon emissions for maybe 10% of GDP. Pretty good ratio. That might go up to 3% or something like that, but we might be saving 15% elsewhere. But if government come along, and the CRC is a good example of this, and try and squeeze us down in absolute terms, some of that potential to make leverage savings elsewhere could be mitigated. So I think at the moment, the real challenge for us is demonstrating how we can kind of enable other sectors to save carbon, and how that's kind of worth spending that little bit of extra carbon on ICT potentially.
Are there numbers on that, though? Can ICT point to actual numbers and say this is what we reduce?
Well, this is one of the major problems, is that the ways that you calculate that are still in development.
Yeah.
There is the Greenhouse Gas Protocol ICT sector guidance, which is underway at the moment, which is basically an end-to-end study of carbon emissions throughout the whole of the IT sector, and it includes cloud services, it includes offsetting through, for instance, teleconferencing. You know, install a teleconference system, how much carbon would you save from not having people flying around the globe to have face-to-face meetings? That protocol guidance is still very much being assessed and calculated, but I think the fear there is that most of the players in there are the large IT companies who may or may not be as nimble as some small to medium enterprises in doing that sort of work.
Yeah, I think I'm doing some work with DEFRA and working on a cross-government green IT strategy. One of the things we've been trying to pull out in trying to advise departments and give them scenarios where they can deliver savings from use of IT. There's been a mechanism to accumulate case studies and give high profile to what has been done out there to give people confidence, as you say, Kate, that will it actually give a return on investment? If I make that extra 1%, can I get 50% saving on my travel? And certainly in DEFRA itself, Natural England and the Environment Agency have made significant savings on travel, 25% or more for business by deploying these technologies and working through with staff. And I think behaviour change is also behind this, to see what they can do to break habits, to break ways of working.
Well, I can give you an example. We installed one of our a PC power management system into one of the universities, and last Christmas the technician told me that nobody had turned their PCs off over the entire Christmas period. And this Christmas, because we had our product in there, which is a user behavioural change aspect to it, everybody turned their machines off. So I've calculated that's about a £300 saving just over the Christmas period. And if you take that on board, you think, well, if these guys didn't turn their PCs off over Christmas, maybe they're not turning them off at night either. And 50% of the time that a PC is on is not being used. So the scope for potential savings is absolutely massive, just on the desktop side. If you take that one step further and start moving it into the data centre itself, and start to shut down services that you don't need overnight, the potential becomes exponential.
Well, I'd say there is a bit of a misnomer there, because with data centres, the most efficient way to use a server is to work it hard all the time. And actually, as an industry, we're getting really good at that with cloud computing. So, in theory, one could do that. I'd say it's a slightly different approach to take there, but certainly it's very wasteful on the desktop side.
I think green IT is dividing itself into two unequal parts. There's the greening of IT, which are the things that we're talking about in terms of servers, virtualization, and so on. And the 10%, the 2%, whatever it happens to be, depending on the measures. And to an extent, those are perhaps easier to quantify because we can see direct changes, direct savings, direct activities. I think the real challenges come in the other part of green IT, which is greening by IT. Some of the things we've been talking about, video conferencing, clouds perhaps. But the two difficulties there, one is what John's already touched on, which is quantification. It's very difficult to know and to measure. And investment requires promise of return up front and evidence of that, and that's very difficult to prove and to validate. And the other aspect that we're finding ourselves moving into is changing of behaviour and changing the way that people and organisations work and behave. And that is very much more difficult. I mean, John's talked about turning PCs off. I know that from the places where I work. It is simply difficult to do and difficult to get people to do things like that, to get people to change their printing behaviour, to get people to change the sort of activities which will make a difference. And when you take that away, if you like, from the very specific IT activities and move it into the sort of wider activities in the economy, then the difficulty increases even further.
Yeah, I think what I'd like just to add into that, sorry Peter, is just to say I think there's a challenge to the IT industry itself to make the kit clever. We've taken some steps with, I think most of us have standby modes, sleep modes, hibernate modes. We need to get better at that. And we need to get better at that in the server room as well as in the normal end user devices. How many servers out there do have intelligent software on them to actually know when they are being less used to switch themselves off, rather than having someone ping it on a control panel.
Well, the other thing is there are a lot of power capping features already in servers, but they're not enabled.
You don't want to enable power capping. But,
Well,
but anyway, so
it is, there's a challenge both directions there to help people.
Indeed.
Why should it always come back to us?
the thing is here, we've got 2%, which actually is, we don't know it's 2%. It was estimated at 2% in
That's
like
actually
2004.
worldwide.
And that was in 2004.
Well, we do
and yet
know-
we know that the data center industry at the moment in electricity growth globally is in about 19% was the last number I saw.
Well, in the UK,
so
it's-
that's annually, compound. So actually it's probably no longer 2%, it's probably a lot more than 2% because from 2004 to 2012, that's a lot of years, that's 8 years. And at the moment, if we're, you see the amount of expansion that cloud's happening. So it's a significant amount. Now what the data center industry needs to say to government is we've had enough of stick, we're in a global market, and all we're getting is stick instead of carrot in order to incentivize us to move forwards and be more energy efficient. And so what's happening is we're losing a lot of our digital economy to Europe and other places that don't have as much stick and have more carrot. And what we need really is more incentives to make the data center market become more efficient, make IT more efficient, and also look at how we can go for behavioural change. I don't think they're two separate elements that they need to exist together, because we can't go and have a digital economy that is going to bring about behavioural change without the right economy that's going to increase the efficiency of IT and make it so our operations are globally competitive.